You're listening to Green Ovation with Diane, the show where global warming is always a hot topic and green entrepreneurs are even hotter, where we chat to ordinary citizens who are innovating extraordinary climate solutions.
Good morning, welcome listeners. You're back with me, Diane, and we're hosting the Green Ovation show, where, as you know, all we talk is climate change. We talk sustainability, we talk solutions, and probably one of the best things that I enjoy talking about, certainly, is entrepreneurship. Innovations that startups and young aspirant businessmen are developing. I think after the last few weeks that we've had in the country, everybody is a bit pained and a bit desperate for solutions, desperate for innovation. We can't, as I think his name is R. Kelly, we can't do, as he suggested, turn back the hands of time. But we can certainly look at forging a way forward for South Africa. Over the last week or two, Green Ovation has branched out and we started filming our first show, which will be airing on YouTube in May. It's called Social Green, where we start looking and start trying to unpack what it means to go green. Can we really address social issues in the context of a green economy? And what exactly is this green economy? We've been chatting over the last few months quite extensively about this green economy. We've been talking about climate change, we've been talking about sustainability, but what does it really mean? For those of us, when I say us, those of us who are in the space of working green and working sustainably and starting businesses in that space, it makes sense to us. But if you ask 2 or 3 different people what it means, you'll get probably 3 different answers, 3 different interpretations of what that means. And as you know, for me, sustainability is about a lot more than hugging trees and saving the rhino. For me, sustainability is about sustainable societies and sustainable businesses. If you don't have sustainable businesses or jobs, you won't have a sustainable society. So joining us this morning, we've got Sunny Morgan, who is a climate leader, part of the African Climate Reality Project. So yes, folks, he's done the whole spiel with Al Gore when he was out here. But more than that, Sunny is an activist probably in many different spheres. I don't think that he necessarily chooses one particular issue. He is, for me, probably one of the greatest human beings and one of the greatest unsung heroes in South Africa. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for the invite, Diane. You exaggerate my input. I'm just an ordinary individual, just an ordinary person trying to make a difference and be part of a solution instead of complaining about all the ills that face us in society.
So Sunny, I had the good fortune of meeting you, I think it was about 2 years ago now, at the Green Drinks. And listeners, as you know, Green Drinks is a global initiative. People who are a little bit obsessed about the environment get together once a month. They have thought leaders, they have innovators, entrepreneurs addressing these forums. So Sunny, when I met you, you were saying that you are involved in the Solar Rooftop business. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so my name is Sunny, and with a name like that, the choice of business that I needed to enter or wanted to enter after being retrenched from a jobs in 2011, the choice was obvious. So people call me, or in fact, I tell them to call me Sunny the Solar Guy. I entered this business because as an activist, I wanted to enter a business and use my energies in a way that for me did 2 things. One, spoke to my activism, and I wanted to be able to use that effectively in the business, and I wanted to make an impact in some way. I chose energy as the space and solar as the medium, simply because, to my mind, it made the most sense. We are blessed in South Africa with one of the world's best solar resources. I think probably number 3 after Australia and Chile. And that being the case, it makes sense. It's just a no-brainer that we should be encouraging people to use solar as an energy source, and it spoke to those two important things. I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to address a social ill.
So, Sunny, I do recall very clearly what you had said to me when I asked you what it was that you were doing. And I asked you, you had told me that you do the Solar Rooftop. And the second part of your response was something that I've carried with me for a long time. You said you are in the business of energy poverty alleviation.
So I learned through my reading and my research that sustainable businesses that make a difference in society, address a social ill. For me, the fact that people die when a candle falls over in a shack fire, like happened in Hout Bay, and the incident we spoke about when we first met, it gutted me. It devastated me that people were dying in their sleep. Children were losing parents because a candle fell over. In unpacking that reality, I came to understand that energy poverty is an attack on basic human rights. The fact that a middle-class family can switch on a light and without even thinking about it, be transported in a way that makes sense in the United States or in the UK or in any developed world. And here were people in South Africa and in Africa living without that basic need. It should shock you, Diane, that a stat I read recently that said an Ethiopian uses less energy than a coffee maker over a year. Now, if you just imagine, we take it for granted that we have an appliance in our home that we take for granted, absolutely use every single day, a television or a fridge. And there are people on the planet, particularly the 600 million in Africa, that don't have, they use less or have access to less energy than a single appliance. And we have 10 or 20 or 30 of those appliances in our homes. It just didn't make sense to me. And energy poverty is a major issue. So if there's energy poverty, there is a lack of opportunity. There is no entrepreneurship. There is a lack of education. You can't study. You can't do your homework. You can't earn an income. And people are then spending their monies on paraffin or kerosene and on candles. So I read in my research that a person at the bottom of the pyramid, these customers, these individuals who suffer from energy poverty, they spend 20% to 30% of their income just on energy. That's on buying wood, that's on buying lighting, that's on charging their cell phones. Now, if we had to extrapolate that to a middle class family, right, then they'll be spending 7,000 or 8,000 rand on their salaries. So as a factor of what they earn, it's disingenuous to those individuals. And as an activist, not just myself, people like you and the people that we met in our sphere and in our network, this is a challenge to us, and we must do something about it.
Well, I like that you've touched on the issue of the housing situation, because for me it's very key, it's critical. So while we know that in the building sector, in the construction environment, that government has said that when you are building new houses, they've got to be energy efficient. So what does that mean? It means that you've got to have these insulated windows so that you're saving on energy. For me, it means that you've got to have solar rooftops. For me, it means you've got to have rainwater harvesting tanks. But I'm not seeing that happen as quickly as I'd like it to happen, because, in fact, I had a client 2 or 3 years ago who worked in the energy efficient window space, and he was contracted in Marikana for this low-cost housing. And the issue was, we're going to move people into these new homes who will have electricity, who won't be able to afford it. They won't be able to, they can buy appliances, but they just can't use them inside those homes. So for me, the whole energy efficient and sustainable living is definitely a critical issue. What have you found, particularly in the area of housing and how people live? how this thought of living sustainably impacts on their lives.
So you touch on two very, very important issues, right? The one is this idea that there isn't a thinking around energy efficiency. So it makes perfect sense, right? There is legislation in South Africa. There's a standard, a national standard. SANS 104-100 XA is a standard that indicates or that encourages or that legislates how energy must be used in your home. So 104-100 XA specifically speaks to hot water and how you heat your hot water. It's a travesty that standard is not more properly policed and encouraged, because there are still building plans that get passed with traditional geysers, electrical element-based geysers instead of solar geysers or heat pumps. So it just doesn't make sense that we have this fantastic standard that encourages a green kind of thinking, but is not properly policed. The other issue is this idea that we need to be able to do big and fancy things, right? Your point about people can have fancy appliances, but they can't afford the electricity. So you can even have middle-class people that are energy poor. So the fact that you have the wire to the door or to the plug, but you can't afford to buy the recharge voucher, or you can't afford to power all of those appliances, that's a classic example of energy poverty. But let's go back to what people can do. It should be mandatory that the incandescent light bulb is banned in South Africa. And I still go to Pick and Pay, and I still go to Checkers, and I still go to Spar, and they have them on the shelves.
Yeah.
So as a bare minimum, we should all be using CFLs, compact fluorescent energy saving lights, which is quite affordable. And then where we can, we should be using LED lighting. I still see fancy, highly paid architects designing homes and buildings that do not make use of or take advantage of north-facing, the benefits of a north-facing roof, or that takes advantage of natural lighting or ventilation. So there are a large group of proponents of it through the Green Building Council and the more progressives, but I still see too many mundane, cookie-cutter type homes that don't take advantage of some basic stuff, like facing your roof north or making it a lighter color. But the other issues is, you touched on water harvesting. When we talk about water harvesting, we think about it as a middle class solution. You must have a large roof, you must have a fancy tank, you must have some sort of technology to capture the water. But if you have a roof that slopes and you have a bucket to catch the water, you are water harvesting. So my first water harvesting project wasn't a JoJo tank with a pressurized pump and fancy reticulation. They were just 25-liter paint drums that I collected, 12 of them, and cut my gutters so that they flow into the buckets. But it is very, very easy for people to structure this and to initiate it. So water harvesting should be mandatory, simply because we are the 30th driest country in the world, and water is going to be a major issue in the near future. We learned those lessons from the drought, not in just 3-4 months ago. We know that Cape Town is struggling now with a lack of rain. And we read now that as climate change begins to impact society and specifically developing countries, we are going to be faced with challenges that, had we looked back and done some basic and initiated some basic experiments and some basic interventions, we'll be able to solve some of the issues. So water harvesting should be mandatory. Energy efficient lighting is the low-hanging fruit. Don't have to build fancy power stations, put all the other stuff that needs to be installed. You can start with those kind of small stuff. Managing our waste, our propensity for consumption and waste and packaging that just gets destroyed and thrown away is unacceptable. What we should be doing, we should be changing the narrative around waste. We should be talking about waste as a fuel source. So when you drive through informal settlements and every single corner you see mountains of waste, we need young entrepreneurs in those areas to begin to understand that waste is a resource and a fuel that could be put to better use than just filling landfills. I'm a great admirer, Diane, of the curbside recyclers. I support them in all the ways that I can. So we do what we call at our homes, and we encourage our friends and our family to do recycling at source. So when the waste is in our hand after we've done, it could be a newspaper you've just read, a magazine you've just done with, or a piece of packaging from the egg container to a sandwich container. So at that point, before you toss it, think about where it can go. So at our home, we recycle plastic, we recycle wood, we recycle glass, we recycle waste, newspaper, white paper. So literally, we could go an entire month without the municipality picking up our waste bin, and we still wouldn't be able to fill it because everything is recycled.
Wow. Sunny, thank you so much. We're going to go to a short break. Listeners, when we come back, we'll be chatting a bit more to Sunny about our consumption patterns. Sunny is an eco-activist, social activist, a green entrepreneur. We'll be back with you in 2 ticks.
Guess who got brands talking? Brandlive.co.za.
Are you an innovator and solution provider? The Innovation Hub is looking for entrepreneurs in the ICT, advanced manufacturing, bioeconomy, and the green economy sectors.
If you have an innovative prototype or startup business which addresses an existing market need and you're predominantly based in Gauteng, we invite you to apply for one of our incubation programs. For more information, visit theinnovationhub.com or call 012-844-0000. The Innovation Hub is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency.
Stay tuned to Green Ovation, the show that gets you talking, keeps you informed on climate change, innovation, and green entrepreneurs who are changing the country, the continent, and the world. Sustainability, innovation, entrepreneurship, just a few of our favorite things. Find out more about us on greennovationsa.co.za. Follow me, Connect, on Twitter at @DD_Naidu now. Brandlive.co.za.
And you're back with me, Diane Naidu, hosting the Green Ovation Show, and I'm joined this morning by Sunny Morgan, who tells me and has shared with our listeners just before we went to a break that it's possible, it's doable for any person to be an eco-activist. It's possible for anyone to live life sustainably. Sunny, I want to touch back on what you were saying. There were quite a few points that I've made here, but the one thing about the fact that it doesn't have to cost money to save. A lot of people view sustainable living or sustainable business practices even as a cost center rather than an investment center. And I think we need to start changing how we position this whole going green story. I like, and I said to Kumi last week, it's a quote of his that I absolutely love, because he just changed the whole positioning of it. He said we must stop talking about saving the planets. The planet will replenish itself, but we will be gone. The oceans they'll sort themselves out. The trees will sort themselves out. And I think this, in the context of an Africa where you still have so many social challenges that you are dealing with. People are struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to find work, never mind maintain work. So when you start saying that going green is more about saving you and ensuring your own survival, your children's survival, your grandchildren's survival, that definitely changes the whole perspective on going green. Your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with you. And you know, Kumi is one of my heroes, so I listen carefully to what he says. I went to a conference a few years ago, and there was a speaker from the World Wildlife Fund, and I don't recall the name, but he made a single point, and it stuck with me and has informed my decisions from that point to now, how I define my business, how I define my role, and how I define this space. We err when we talk about the green economy. There isn't a green economy. There's just actually only one economy. We just need to make it green. So that's a reality, right? Because when we think about the green economy versus the real economy, or the main economy, then we are differentiating, right? And now we ask people to make a choice. What we should be doing is to talk about one economy that is green, right? And that makes perfect sense, because then we can implement in that main economy, move away from fossil-based fuels towards renewable energy, move away from consumption to saving, move away from materialism in its broad and bad sense to a sustainable lifestyle. Going green should be a way we operate. It's not an ideology like a religion. It must become a way of life. As an example, even for somebody living in a shack or in an RDP home, you need a small area, 1 square meter, and you can grow some of your own food. We've tried it. You can grow your own tomatoes, you can grow your own potatoes, you can grow your own spinach. We have just recently participated, our business, in a project as a supplier to a project that was initiated in a number of schools through EarthLife, Oxfam, and Gender CC. And what that was to demonstrate a sustainable ecosystem. So each school was provided with 20 kilowatts of solar PV, that's solar panels on their roof, and a grid-tied system so they could use the energy during the day. Perfect sense for schools, because schools operate during hours when the sun is up. A food garden, growing sustainable vegetables, and not experimental vegetables and stuff that can be used. So we eat marrojo, we eat spinach, we eat pumpkin, we eat butternut.
What are experimental vegetables, Sadie?
No, it's esoteric stuff that people want to do, cherry tomatoes and fancy stuff that take a lot of work and has to be properly managed. Grow the stuff in your garden that you're going to eat, so that you don't lose interest in it, Diane. One of the issues. The other issue, so the food garden. So we had solar PV on the roofs, the food garden, and then we had a biodigester. Biodigester is a way to make your own gas from the waste. That speaks to this idea of the circular economy. So there's really, really minimized waste. How we package, how we consume, how we use. Our business wants to encourage, and not just my business, my lifestyle, the people I associate with, the people I talk to, the activists that we try to impact, and the school kids that we try to encourage. We want to encourage them to live in a way that harmonizes with nature, that brings your existence, which is basically the essence of sustainability, into harmony with your resources. So there's no wastage. There's a respect for the environment. But we understood as a business, this message didn't really resonate with business people. So a lot of them preach this idea of the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, but it was really a hard sell. Why? Because our messaging was predicated on the tree-hugger mentality. Do it for the planet, do it for your grandchildren. But what we really realized is that to them, they understand income statements and balance sheets. They understand profit and loss. So we redefined our messaging and we made it make sense as an explanation that actually going green doesn't have to cost you, it can actually save you. So today we have that empirical data to prove that if you install solar panels on your roof, you're actually going to save some money. We can do it for a small RDP home and make that value proposition. We can do it for middle class South Africa, and we can do it for corporate South Africa. It's a very, very easy equation to explain. But solar panels, make your own electricity. It means you're not buying it. It means you're saving money.
Yeah.
As easy as
I
that.
think that's great. I think I've got, look, my head is buzzing now. We went out to Marikana to go and view this housing development a few years back, and on our way, we spotted this house. And it's obviously not a middle class home. It was one of the mine workers who was actually working at Marikana. And on his house, he had 4 lonely little solar panels, but tiny ones. And he had a huge rainwater harvesting tank. So me being the person that I am, I went to go knock on his door and say, who's the owner of this house? I want to find out why you did this. How did you think about doing this? And he says, this guy is probably in his early 30s, Sonny, telling me he's been an eco-activist for years. that he understands that we've got sun, we've got solar resource, he could use that. And what he does, just although he is a shop steward as well in the unions, he uses his airtime inside those union meetings to talk about going green. And I think the great thing about it is that it can be anybody, and it can be the person that you least expect to be that eco-activist in your world, isn't it?
It is absolutely 100% correct. So when we look at eco-activists, or we look at people in the green economy, let's not talk about the economy, in the green space, we think of individuals illustrious like Sir Richard Attenborough, and we think, okay, I can't rise to that level. I can't be a Richard Branson. You can just be you, right? You read a little bit, get some literature, and there's Greenpeace, there's EarthLife, there's World Wildlife Fund, fantastic literature that comes out of these organizations. There's marches you can attend. So it's very, very easy to participate. And every person actually, right, inherently understand that we must save the planet. We need to channel that passion. We need to channel those kind of, and I like the guy you met in Marikana, sounds like one of my warriors, you know. We need to take advantage of that. People inherently understand good from bad, good from evil. They understand waste. What we need to do is we need to channel that passion and that creativity towards a focused area. You say you become that source in your community. So encourage people to recycle. Solar panels on your roof do two things. They save you electricity, right? But they set you apart from everyone else. People then begin to look towards you. Initially, just as the guy on the small house in Marikana, but eventually the community recognizes this guy stands out, this lady stands out, and they do something. The heroes are actually the people who plant food gardens for communities, people who teach people how to water harvest, people who teach others how to fit small solar panels. What we haven't been able to do effectively in South Africa is to be able to create a narrative around the benefit of going green, not just for the planet, but for your pocket. And then for the economy, it is a job creator. I was really, really upset when I heard that the truck drivers were protesting that they were going to lose their contracts because they couldn't carry coal anymore, right? So, yes, they bought vehicles, they're in a contract with someone, they're feeding their families from the proceeds, and they have businesses. But to my mind, a narrow point of view, a narrow-minded position that somebody needs to articulate better to them. So if you stop transporting coal, you'll start transporting solar panels. Become focused on the idea that renewable energy, solar and wind, will also create jobs. Not my stats from the union movement themselves, that the green economy, as it was envisaged 3 or 4 years ago, can create 1 million new, sustainable, clean and desirable jobs. Where if you're transporting coal, there may be adverse health effects. If you're mining the coal, certainly there are adverse effects. Not only on the visual, but on the environment too. Now we can begin to talk about clean, sustainable, desirable jobs. Now, if those stats said 3 or 4 years ago that it was 1 million,
what is it today?
What is it today? Because everything we underestimated. We underestimated how fast renewables will grow, what the impact it will have, how many people it will be, and certainly the price. So I am an evangelist for renewable energy for a number of reasons. But one of the passionate reasons that govern how I think and how I present when I'm presenting to corporates or to investors is simply around this issue, that you will be participating in creating jobs in South Africa, skilled labor. We can teach our children about maths and science and technology because solar and renewable energies are heavy on technology. So it's an opportunity that we miss if we don't encourage it.
I think I must just, there's a lot again. when I'd spoken to this guy and I said to him, because obviously he doesn't have the budget for pamphlets, and when I say about his 4 little solar panels, I mean little solar panels. These were like baby solar panels. And I said to him, so how do you communicate? How do you tell people? He said he's got 2 pamphlets. The one is his electricity bill, the other one is his water bill. He says that's all that he uses to encourage going sustainably or living sustainably in his home. And I've had this conversation with Michael O'Brien Onyeka, was the executive director for Greenpeace Africa a few years back. And as you do when you're having these sessions and you're trying to brainstorm and you're carrying the whole weight of the world on your shoulders, I said to Michael, imagine if this whole going green and living sustainably had the kind of marketing budget that Coca-Cola does. Because, and I shared it with, I think it was Lindsay at the Cradle last week, saying that I'd watched a documentary on National Geographic, and it was Ewan McGregor, and he was doing this whole trick, and he was working for Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. He was trying to get these vaccines to like these remote parts of Africa. So he goes on this little boat trip, and it looks very dire, and it's swampy, and it's really, he put his life on the line to go and transport all of these vaccines to this little community. But lo and behold, he gets to this community, and there's a huge Coca-Cola sign. There's a Spaza shop. So I'm asking myself, these companies they can talk about going green, and like you said, it's a lot of greenwashing. Their commitment to sustainability only extends to their reporting. They're not prepared to invest in companies or organizations or movements such as what you or I are doing to tell people about the benefits of sustainability. I wish we had that kind of budget, because there's no place in the world where Coca-Cola can't reach. How do we change it?
I think you've knocked the nail on the head. What we need to do is we need to learn from these organizations, right? So let's take the Coca-Cola example, and let's take the example of SA breweries that deliver beer. What can we learn from these 2 organizations? They have a fantastic distribution network.
They do.
Right? So imagine if we know that the Coke gets through borders, the Coke gets through conflict areas.
Yeah.
Thinking creatively and innovatively. Why don't we partner with companies like that to deliver the solar panels, to deliver the literature, to give us space on their trucks to advertise? I learned this from Anita Roddick from The Body Shop many, many years ago. I was fortunate to meet her in South Africa, and she came for a book signing. And her company had a special but very simple solution to a problem that was endemic in Britain at the time. So they have these fancy trucks doing distribution around the whole of Europe. And missing children was also a problem at the time. So what she would do is she would give out the space on the back of the truck for advertising a massive picture of a missing child. It indicated that their recovery rate of kids was better than the police recovery rate at the time, simply because these trucks were all over the country with these pictures. Now, we can learn distribution from places like that. But the fundamental point you're making, right, is around greenwashing, right? I read an advert or saw an advert recently about a car tire that said they were an eco tire. Now, I think there should be some process that you can't call, just like you can't call something organic or free range because there's legislation that determine it. I think we should start taking ownership of the word eco. So just because you have a car tire that by its own definition is just a tire, the company could not explain to me why it was called a eco tire. Now we have that same kind of labeling, which is greenwashing, on a major car brand. They have a vehicle that's called an eco something, right? But I don't think they can actually tell us why it's called an eco car. If they had that particular label on their electric version, that would make sense to me, right? So we must be conscious of the fact that not everything is eco-friendly or environmentally friendly just because it has a label that says green or eco. We must take ownership of the space, right? And hold companies like the big multinationals, we must hold them to account. I have yet to see in a fundamentally workable way how these companies partner with businesses like us
Yeah.
that own the space, that really talk about employment in our business. All the workers that we employ as installers were unemployed people without the skill set. We employ them, so we dealt with the issue of unemployment in a small, meaningful way, and we've upskilled them. I took an ordinary electrician, and now he's a solar electrician. He does his own business. We took people who were on the street with hope or hopeless and given them some hope. So if we can do that in our small business, and the people in our network, Diane, 100 people that think like us, we can create 500 jobs of the 1 million.
Yeah.
Right? And then you go to a big multinational, a big supermarket, a big office block, and all of their work goes to other multinationals,
Yeah.
other European-based or American-based companies. So I find very little support. They do support the local businesses that are very well known, very brand efficient, very nice to be associated with, but at a level where there is a real small business, small businesses like our friends own, right? They struggle. And we struggle to make the connection simply because it's not seen to be too beneficial
Yeah.
to be associated with a name
Yeah.
that no one knows.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think you do call in our class, and we were talking about this whole sustainable brands. Is for some people, it's just a PR exercise. That's purely what it is. They do it because it's good for their reputation. In other instances, it might be shareholders who are putting pressure on them to do that. But we're not finding the kind of support for sustainable initiatives that you would necessarily find in a country like Denmark. Okay, I love Copenhagen. I'll just put it out there. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. So we had gone on this tour, and we landed on this little island called Sonneborg. And we arrived, and as we disembarked, the stench in the air, Sunny, was incredible. Why? Because they've got more pigs than people in Sonneborg. More pigs than people. And the beautiful thing was, or that still exists, is that Sonneborg has been actually importing their pig waste, to Germany. I'm just saying, there's now a good example of a circular economy where what you take out is what you put back, and you pass it on. I think that companies, or even in fact most of the companies in Denmark that we'd come across, were very interesting. There was one shoe factory that we had been to, and this shoe factory captured all of their steam, and they converted it back into energy, where over and above their normal profits of selling shoes, they now had another business
Selling energy.
Yeah, where they were selling heat and whatever it was to this community. So I'm just saying, they get the whole sense of, when you are energy efficient, when you are water efficient, when you are waste efficient, that it drives your profits up. So on a household level, that means that you are going to experience a better quality of life if you just go green. It's not a cost, it's an investment, it's a long-term investment.
It is important that people begin to think about going green, not just in the narrow sense of saving money, which is extremely important. We must be talking about the social benefit, the health benefit. So companies, I find, do it, most that I have come across do it because of reporting. So we need to be able to report triple bottom line. There's companies like the big banks have sustainability reports, and that makes perfect sense, right? Yeah. So I can understand what drives them. What we need to be getting towards or moving towards is where this just becomes a way of life. Give you an example. At my own house, because of the nature of the business that I'm in, I'm already quite energy efficient, right? I've reached a point now of energy, let me call it neutrality, but I'd like to say that my consumption equals my production. So I really have, my bill is minuscule. I would be able to say now that I'm probably using less than 10 rands worth of grid electricity a day. And that just gives you an indication of what is possible. My system is not a huge system. It's the right system, the right size system in terms of capacity for my consumption patterns. And I've done this. I have heat pumps that help me produce my hot water. So the elements in my geysers are completely turned off. They exist only as a backup. And in the 3 or 4 years that I've had the heat pump, I've never had to switch them on. So I deal with the hot water issue. I deal with the issue of solar PV panels on my roof that does the generation during the day. And because I have a home-based business and an office, I take care of all of my energy needs during the day, which is a fair amount. And then I just use the grid electricity at night. So this is possible for an ordinary individual. I must say that we need better levers to encourage people to adopt this process. Now, the best levers are financial levers, right? The saving the planet for your grandchildren conversation, a lot of us understand, but it's too much in the future for people to really grasp and act upon it. It's not a lever that's going to change your behavior.
Intangible,
Yeah, the behavior that's going to change is money in your pocket, the savings, and the example of the Americana guy with the 2 pamphlets, the electricity bill and the water bill. So these are real and immediate indicators. So we need the government, we need our local municipalities to do a number of things. One of the things is their reticence to sign the PPAs for the large programs, which is a fantastic program. South Africa has done made enormous strides in our renewable energy program as it was envisaged originally, which is in 2012, 2011. We're at the tail end of that particular program, the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program, or the REAP program.
Yeah.
And the last bit of PPAs, which are power purchase agreements that need to be signed by the utility, is being delayed for a number of reasons. Some of the reasons are more obvious than others, grid capacity and issues like that. But it sends the signal to society in general that the utility is not behind the rollout of renewable
Renewables.
energy.
Agreed.
And one can understand the narrow-minded thinking because renewable energy is the antithesis to grid electricity, right? In South Africa, in the South African example, because our electricity is 70 to 80%, depending on whose figures you believe, coming from a coal-based production. And as we move into the future, we need to lessen that amount and increase renewables. So it sends a signal that the utility is either challenged, threatened, or just not in support of renewable energy. I hope that's not the case. So they need to send a better signal, right? Then they need to back that signal up with action, right? And it doesn't have to be the glossy PR exercise. It needs to be real, right? And then it must be properly executed and managed. Then they need to create a mechanism to encourage people to do it. So either you get a tax benefit, which is available at the moment, but only for businesses and for commercial enterprises in terms of Section 12L of the Income Tax Act. They need to extend that to individuals. They need to find a way that is equitable, where they pay for the electricity that is fed back. So Cape Town, Pretoria, and Johannesburg have pilot projects, but it's still onerous in terms of how you apply for it. It should be as easy as applying for a telephone, the process. And then they must encourage people to do that and simply have a way that says to individuals, if you invest in this power plant on your roof, here is the benefit of buying it back, and not make it so onerous like it currently is. And then, instead of it being a pilot project in 3 metros, we need to make it ubiquitous across the country for those who can, in a sustainable way. It does pose challenges. It poses challenges around the metering. It poses challenge around the technology. It poses challenges around the issue of when it's produced and when it's needed. But those kind of challenges can be addressed because we are an innovative nation. This space is growing. This space is developing. And there are cutting edge technologies or ideas from around the world that we can implement. What we are working with really is a better management of the grid. So we are slowly developing a smart grid. Your example of Denmark, of most Scandinavian countries, is that they have understood how to create a balance between the traditional energy business model, which is the grid and the utility, and the renewable space. And they are able to manage that and marry those two seemingly opposing technologies into a technology and into a system that is easy to manage. And that's the smart grid. So what do we bring another layer of technology, but we bring another layer of expertise. We should be leading that in Africa and not be lagging.
Yeah. I think the important thing again to note is that, I mean, I've got my own gripes here, which I talk about every so often on the show. Energinet, which is the Danish counterpart to Eskom, they run on an NPO basis, not for profit. And even on that basis, over the last 3 or 4 years, they've had to cut the price of electricity because they started reflecting a profit. That already tells you that their thinking was counterintuitive, number one. Number two, what you touched on just a bit is that if people don't see the value of renewables, in other words, if it's going to cost you less to buy wind power or solar power, you're going to buy that as opposed to buying coal. And I get that we sort of are subsidizing the development of renewables in some shape or form. But I think that for me is a very clear benefit for anybody to understand. We're just not doing it right. And then the one big discussion that I did want to have with you today was, and you touched on it just a little bit, was, and I call it decolonized consumption patterns. We met with an activist, but she refers to herself as a social activist in Sweden. And she said to me, I'm sure, this was at the end of, I think, 5 or 6 days of traveling across these countries. She said, I'm sure you've seen all of these amazing technologies and innovations. And she said to the group, and we were 3 Moroccans, 1 South African, 1 Nigerian. She said, for all of that innovation, it's not going to solve the world's problems. She said, I'm speaking to you as an individual, as a social activist. I'm not speaking to you as a representative or a PR person for one of these major companies. I'm saying to you, it counts for nothing if we do not change the way that we consume. And then she started talking about, for example, she spoke about our eating patterns, the way we consume food, the way that these big supermarket chains have killed the grocer on the side of the road. You can't go and choose. You can't buy only what you're going to eat. It's prepackaged, so there's going to be waste. Then she says, and that creates another business, which is the packaging business. And again, it's plastics and styrofoams and whatever else it is. And tins. So now you're actually creating another industry to recycle the plastics, the tins, the foams and all of that. And her thinking is that globally, we've got to start looking at the way that we, number one, live our lives. Number two, the way we do business. So she mentioned the example of, and I didn't know at the time that Volvo had been bought out by a Chinese company. Volvo is a Swedish brand, but they were bought out by the Chinese. And she's saying, like, whoever made us think that we needed to conquer the world? Whoever made us think that if you have a business that is thriving in a particular area, why do you need to go and emit even more GHG emissions, carbon emissions, through flight or cargo shipping or whatever it is? Is it not enough to have that business that is thriving in your area? And she was saying there's a global problem with humanity in the way that we not only live our lives, but the way that we view our lives. Sunny, that's a loaded statement. I can't wait to hear from you.
So to distill all of what you just said to perhaps 2 words, right? Greedy consumption. This is what drives humanity at the moment. This idea that it has to be bigger, it has to be better, it has to be all over the place is a false dichotomy, right? Simply what we should be doing is making sure that we think about our impact. So I'm a follower of a professor from an American university. I hate to misquote him, but it's probably Columbia. So he's Jeffrey Sachs. He's recognized as one of the world leading exponents of what we call environmental economics. And he talks about this issue of planetary boundaries He talks about the issue of consumption. He talks about the issue of how we relate to resources. What we should be doing is we should be thinking more clearly about the impact that we have on the environment around us and the products that we use. Packaging is one of the easiest stories to talk about. If you go to a leading South African middle class shopping center and buy a packet of grapes, the grapes will come in another package, right? If you get that package, they give you another package to pack that package in. So it just doesn't make sense. Have you bought a microwave food product? So it comes in a plastic, it comes in a perforated plastic shrink wrapping, it gets in a branded piece of cardboard, right? And in another packet. So it just doesn't make sense that the product is designed, right, to be wasteful.
Yeah.
The food size of the package, if you buy a lasagna, right? I've yet to see anyone finish one of those 42 rand 99 cent lasagnas, right? So not enough thought has been given to this idea of manageable sizes so that you buy what you need, right? Waste of food, waste of overproduction is endemic in our society. You can even go to a poor household and you'll see that they throw out some stuff, they waste, they overcook. And why? This is because it is almost inherent in our behavior because everything is bigger. You have 2-liter Cokes, right? And if you don't finish a 2-liter Coke, there's a quarter left which you have to throw away. So I'm just saying what we should be thinking about is this idea that everything we do has an impact. It's laughable that there is still a portion of society that is debating whether humans have an impact on climate change or are the cause of climate change. And
Who are those people? Are you out there? Are you out there?
I hope
Put your
not.
hand up.
There's a whole school of thought that people are thinking that the jury's still out on whether we have an impact.
It's insane.
Right? I read an article last night which really, really scared me. And it painted a picture of a new concept, a new word that I read. It's called river piracy. Now, I was expecting to find a story relating to how someone stole the river, right? But that wasn't it. It's an article that appeared, or should be in the current issue of Nature Geoscience magazine. And basically what it said is there's a river in Canada that used to flow in a certain direction. I think it was north. And because of climate change, that river was swallowed up by another river that was adjacent to it, flowing in the opposite direction. Now, one would have thought, who really cares which way the river flows? And now this river has been hijacked by another river. But when I read the article in its entirety, I realized that there may be people who live upstream of the first river that depend on either the water resource that flows past their village or the food source that flows past their village. There may be industries like logging that require the river for transporting the logs. That now all falls away. So in that simple example, we can see how a river that feeds a specific community is now no longer viable for that community because of climate change. The river flow had reduced. Another river had taken over the role of that river, but in the opposite direction. Now, it sounds like an academic paper, it sounds like an academic discussion, but just imagine if that were to happen on the Nile, right? That flows through a number of countries. Or what if that were to happen in parts of South America, or even here in Africa, where people are fundamentally and intrinsically linked to the resource of the river. So we're not thinking along those lines. We're not thinking about that. Then we have the school of thought that says, we wonder if climate change is real. Now, obviously, we know its impact. What we as activists should be doing is talking about climate resilience. We should be talking about adaptation. We should be talking about how we can encourage, teach, and share knowledge with people who are going to be suffering the impact of climate change over the next few years. I think that climate change poses an existential risk to humanity. Not a generation from today, not 2 generations from today. There are some extreme cases of academics who say that we only have 10 years left. When I say 10 years, I mean just 10 small years left to undo the damage that we're doing. Otherwise, we reach what Jeffrey Sachs calls that boundary, right? Where if we cross over that boundary, we've done too much damage for it to be reversible. I like what Kumi says, right? That the trees will take care of themselves, the rivers will take care of them. It will take a long time, millennia to do it, right? But we won't be there to enjoy it. So isn't that the definition of an existential risk? I think it is.
Folks, we only had one tiny little short break today because the conversation was riveting, to say the least. We were joined in studio this morning by Sunny Morgan, who is an eco-activist, a social activist, a green entrepreneur, a father, and a loving husband. Sunny, we can't wait to have you back again. And I will re-quote your, whether it was a misquote or not, that there is no such thing as a green economy. There's only one. We just need to make it green. Sunny, next time when you come back, we do want to talk a bit more about your activism, your hashtag Save South Africa movement and the activities that you're doing. But for now, we're signing off on the Green Ovation Show. And as you know, listeners, this is what we say every week when we close. We have 54 million voices in South Africa. I'm using mine. Use yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Diane.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.